Imagine a world in which anyone, regardless of technical expertise, could simply describe their idea for a software application, and an AI tool would then transform that idea into a fully functional application within hours. Today, we sit down with an entrepreneur pioneering an AI tool, turning this vision into reality. Hello and welcome to Startup Stories. Today I have the pleasure of introducing you to Luke Ferris, who is founder and CEO of Origin AI. Hi Luke, and welcome.
Hey Graham, how you doing?
Good to
Thanks
see
for
you
having
again. I would like to start off today by hearing your elevator pitch.
me.
I
Good.
hope you have it ready. You should always have it ready.
Well, I'll try. It changes, but yeah, I'll give you the latest one. But yeah, so for Origin, the elevator pitch is, businesses tend to know what software and digital tools they want to build. But getting product teams, the designers, the developers, the project managers, getting sign off, getting budget sign off to actually build those tools is always an uphill struggle. Those resources are always expensive and they're always hard to come by. So Origin is an AI powered product team. So you can be a normal domain expert business user, non-techie, and you can build software using Origin, whatever it is you might need for your business.
This sounds like some kind of singularity is being approached where AI will start to build itself. Are we there yet?
That's a question actually that we ask ourselves quite a lot, and we wondered, we're approaching a point where Origin will be able to build parts of itself. I do think what did seem science fiction until maybe a year or two ago now really is something that looks like it could happen, right? And happen in a time frame that is kind of important and tangible and practical to the kind of decisions we make today, which is fascinating.
So what you're doing is very exciting. I would love to dive a bit deeper. And can you take us through the journey of the potential customer, how they would use this, what inputs are required from them, what kind of time frame, what kind of expertise is required by them? Just please talk us through the Origin AI experience.
For sure. And in reality, if anyone's ever worked with a human product team, then they're going to feel like the process is pretty recognizable. The reason for that is one of the things we found with Origin is the more we mirror best practice, a best practice human team, the better the results are that we get. But from an end user perspective, they're going to sit down and they're going to brainstorm, is literally what we call it now, with our AI architect. So it can literally chat in a non-technical, non-product language about a business problem that they're having, and usually, like for all of us, right? It's a bit of a blend, right? You have an idea, somewhat of an idea about what it is that how you want to solve your problem, but you don't perhaps know specifically, and it will help tease out some of those details with you, filling in the blanks where necessary. And once you're happy with what it's come up with, it will then turn that into a project plan, and it will start running through that project plan, gradually doing all the technical work and obviously the development work, but then actually deploying it for you into a production environment. It will literally give you a URL that is a production grade URL. So you could, if a million people tomorrow turned up and wanted to use your app, then they would be able to do so, right? The infrastructure would be able to handle it. So it really does take you end to end in that process.
I think most people are familiar with generative AI and prompts. Do you require a complete prompt in one shot, or is there some kind of iterative process where the AI might say, you're missing this information, and talk you through the whole process?
It's actually a really good point. Because one of the things we realized very early on, and to be fair, I think this is something that most developers have known for a long time, is that there is no perfect specification. For decades, people have been trying to write sort of Word documents that manage to contain every single possible bit of specification for a piece of software, and it always fails. Those documents are never useful, right, in any regard. And Origin knows this. We know that. We know this as kind of experienced product teams. So instead, we take an approach which at Bain we used to term like giving something to push against, right? So it will take very, very limited information at the start of the flow. It will fill in blanks based on what it knows in order to give you something for you to give your opinion on. Because as soon as it can give you something that it can give your opinion on, then you can say, oh yeah, actually that's not quite what I meant, or oh actually that's good, but like can we do this? Can we do that? So it tries to get to that point as quickly as possible, and then iterates with you until you've got to obviously where you want to be.
Right. So that could literally happen in one day.
Yeah, without question. I mean, a simple app should take less than 30 minutes.
So once it's actually deployed, and we talked about this on a previous call, the code is generated, it's deployed. From that moment on, can Origin AI tweak the code?
Yeah, absolutely. Because it's kind of an ongoing, just like again like a real product. It's like an ongoing iterative process. So you get to a version of maybe a first set of features, and then you extend it by saying, actually, now I want to build this, now I want to add that, and you can do that with the AI architects. If you reach a point where you want to bring in a human developer, which is from what we've learned from our existing beta customers is a possibility, then you can sort of eject the solution by getting the actual code base. So you always own the underlying code, right? It's always yours. We just know that the primary users aren't going to be necessarily going in and editing that.
But if a bug is found, for example, is it human intervention required, or can Origin fix itself?
Yeah, Origin can fix itself. So it basically is doing a whole load of quality control throughout the process, and not just at the end, but actually all the way through the life cycle of its build. It's doing a ton of different kind of QA activities. So it will find things before they turn into bugs, which is the best time to find them. It will find them after it's finished its work, and then sometimes still at the moment it won't find them. And that might be manifesting as actually an error that's displayed, or it could be something that's missing. So perhaps you asked it to do two things and it's only done one of them, for example. So there's an opportunity then to say, hey, that's not quite right in whatever fashion it is. But if it's an error, you're not expected to know anything about that error, right? I mean, it's helpful to tell it what you're seeing, just as if you were talking to a human developer, but you're not expected to understand what's going on.
So I know that you're taking a really interesting, novel approach to avoid sort of hallucinations and to allow you to deliver much more complex, and this approach actually allows you to kind of scale the complexity, if I understood correctly. Could you talk us through this a little bit, how this works?
Yeah, that's true. And I would say, really, if we think about the kind of technical hurdles that needed to be solved in order to achieve this type of thing, this was really front and center, and still is, right, for any company that is trying to do this. There is no off the shelf way to solve this, and the fundamental is that modern LLMs will produce things that are very long, right, potentially the size of novels or whole code bases, but as the scale grows, the quality just collapses. So what you need to be able to do is, instead of trying to build, an entire code base at once, you need to break it down into a series of jigsaw piece puzzles and produce each of those pieces individually and then stitch them back together. But when as you can imagine, if you were trying to do this physically with a jigsaw puzzle, right, if you were having to make each of the puzzle pieces, you'd want a mix, right, of creativity and kind of determinism, as a set of rules, right? The piece needs to fit perfectly, and it does need to contain exactly the things that are required. Otherwise, when you put all these things back together, it'll just be chaos, right? Nothing will work. Origin has something inside of it that really we spent a lot of the last year developing that we call bounded determinism, which is really a way for us to say to basically solve this problem. To say, okay, how do we break down into the little pieces, and then for each of the little pieces, in what way do we want to bring in the non-deterministic, creative part of this amazing, kind of LLM Gen AI technology, and which bits do we want to remain fixed, right? And we want to say, no, no, you must do these things. And getting that right is non-trivial and really the core of any system that's trying to do what we're doing.
Are you aware of anyone else using the same approach?
I would say we have borrowed and based some of our original thinking on stuff on ideas, right, that were out there, but I'm not aware of anybody that has a kind of concrete framework. It might just be that they're not publicizing this, right, and making it kind of open source. I suspect that others do have something that achieves the same kind of thing. At least they should, from what I know, because otherwise it would be completely impossible to achieve what we're doing.
Well, I understand that some founders can be tempted to achieve short-term results to attract the attention of investors and potential customers, but that's not always the way to win the race, right? So
that's true.
If I understand, your competitors are taking a more short-term, instant results approach, which is frankly less scalable.
Well, yeah. It's an interesting one, right? Because obviously I'm not privy to the exact inner workings of some of these tools, but if I look at some of our competitors, I can see that some of the stuff that they're doing is happening at a speed which tells me that their kind of workflow, if you will, is highly simplistic, because there's no way to achieve it, even with the fastest models and the fastest chips. There's no way to achieve that, our kind of workflow, unless you take a little bit of extra time to kind of think it through. So sometimes when I see things happening in seconds, I know that that's not going to support the complexity of solution that Origin can.
And speaking of complexity, what is your biggest technical challenge? Or is that it? Have we just?
Yeah, I mean that would be. I mean, that is the foundation of it, right? I think if I look back, like kind of a year ago, we were at a point where the most complex thing you could build is, something like a to-do application, a task list type application, consistently, I would say, to do it. Now we're at a point where really you can build whole CRMs, ERP. We're not actually sure, honestly, where the complexity threshold is, but we recognize that we're not at the end of the journey, right? We're on this continuum somewhere where, at the start it was just amazing that these things were able to write code at all, and at the other end of it, we're at a point where there really are no human engineers, and we're somewhere on that continuum. And some of the big challenges to get further along it are what we're talking about here, this kind of bounded determinism, stopping these hallucinations at scale.
So speaking of this continuum, could you illustrate more specifically what can you deliver now? And then maybe we can discuss what you think you'll be able to deliver in, let's say, 5 years. Because you mentioned, for example, the basic to-do list earlier. So we've progressed from that. So could you let us know?
Yes.
Where can you comfortably deliver?
I'll give you a flavor. We can comfortably deliver applications that require, multiple different bits of data to be manipulated and used, right? So things like a CRM, for example, right, or an ERP system. One of our beta customers was building an inventory management system, for example, the other day, or a time tracking tool. Anything in this vein, it should be able to deal with. But there's kind of a complexity threshold, and it is constantly increasing, right? So we're never quite sure where it is at any one time. But if someone sat down to me today and said, "Hey, I want to build a CRM for for my team, and it's just, it's a small team and it has these requirements, then I'm probably going to say, great, that's perfect. If they sit down and say, I want to build a Salesforce competitor, then I'm going to be like, well, you might want to come back in a year right, and see how things have progressed, because this, in terms of size and in terms of feature sets, I don't know that it's beyond the complexity threshold that Origin could achieve now, but I suspect that it would be.
Could you let us know, who do you see as the potential customer? Who is it suited for, and who is it not suited for?
Mm. Yeah, so this ties to the continuum a little bit, actually, in the sense that our target customer, I think by definition, has to change as the system becomes more and more capable, right, and stable. So our target customer has always been a kind of non-technical business user, right, in a business setting, and to some extent that kind of remains the case. But what we found in the beta is that the people who are most interested in it are perhaps non-technical people working within product teams. So maybe the kind of designers and product managers that aren't developers. So we've got this kind of short-term target, and then a longer-term target that we get to over the coming next few years.
It seems like a paradigm shift in a way that any department of a business, any role, any person who needs an application can just dive straight in and create that application. You've basically cut out the whole tech team, which I imagine has its pros and cons, but certainly there are many pros.
Yes, exactly. I mean, and this is the truth is that we know we get to that point, right? The destination is very clear at the moment, not just for us. I'm talking as an industry, as kind of society, if you will, in general. That is the place that we get to, where software is really created almost in the moment, right, to solve whatever the problems are that you require. And it's a fascinating kind of future. The slight challenge is we don't know exactly how long that continuum is, right, before we get from where we are now to the destination. It could be 5 years, it could be 10 years, right? It could be 20 years. We're not entirely sure. All we know is that we're moving quite fast along that line.
So just to challenge the idea a little bit, I imagine that sometimes people need software and there is an off-the-shelf tested solution available immediately, bug-free, or as bug-free as anything can be. This is not going to be your target. It seems to me you're targeting customized applications, highly customized applications working within proprietary environments, which you can custom.
I'd say yes, but only in the short term. So it's part of this kind of shift, right? These stepping stones as the technology kind of matures. In reality, when we get to the kind of destination point, why would you spend millions a year on something like Salesforce that needs to be highly configured anyway for your business at great cost, when almost in the moment you could create a version of that is perfectly suited and perfectly reliable for your business?
So that's an interesting point. You could say that no software is ever the perfect software for the client. There's always compromise. So the off-the-shelf solutions have their pros, but at the same time, you can deliver a much more customized solution. So I guess that's a decision for the customer to make. And as your solutions deliver more and more successful projects with less and less tweaking, and people start to see the heavy advantages of customization. And it's not just customization. In some cases, people will create software which doesn't exist on the off-the-shelf market. So I imagine this is where you can really deliver value.
Quite right. Yeah, absolutely. I think in the short term, it's people building highly specific stuff and perhaps seeing it as a way to save some money, on say a tool that maybe they pay 10,000 a year for, today as some kind of off-the-shelf SaaS tool, but maybe they only use like 10% of the features, and they think, what, we could just, I mean, it's not going to change the business, but we could save that money by just, having something running that was specific to us and offering us those 10% of the features.
What are the biggest, what would you say is the biggest surprise you've encountered so far on your journey, on your startup journey?
The biggest surprise. Well, I mean, I'm always guilty of, like everybody, I think, of thinking that things are going to be less complex than they they actually are. So that definitely goes without saying. I'd say the whole business is grounded on honestly something that me as a I've been building software now for over 20 years, right? As a developer and as part of product teams. The technology is really so different and so game changing, to anything that I've seen before in my entire career, and I compare that even to things like, say, the internet, itself. This is so game changing in what it can do, that really the fact it is possible at all still to this day surprises me. Still does.
Speaking of challenges, what is the biggest business challenge you're facing?
Well, I think we touched on it. We touched on it a little bit, actually, which is, we know that the destination provides, it will be completely game changing, right? To everybody, potentially trillions of dollars, right? In kind of spend and in kind of market size. But it's also quite clear that we're not there today. So figuring out how do we make those stepping stones that takes us from something that is maybe a little bit cutting edge, the type of thing that maybe a product team would try out today, to that destination of a business user who really would never consider ever like using a human engineer, because that would be dangerous. I mean, why would we ever let human beings close to our code, right? Getting, completing that journey and figuring out what those stepping stones are, that's a real challenge, especially for a startup, right? Because we obviously have to raise money, and quite reasonably investors want to know how we're going to make a return, right, on that money. And if we don't have a concrete story for that and what those stepping stones look like, then it's impossible to continue. So it's a bit of a juggling act.
So would you say that overcoming culture and psychology, these human aspects, are actually that's one of the biggest challenges you're facing?
Quite, but and of course we don't know what I'd say it's twofold. It's one that quite genuinely the product, right, cannot support the whole of the future market, right, the future addressable market that we're going for. So we need to find these smaller markets. And then on the customer side, there's very much a psychology element of, how do people, this is real kind of category creation, so to speak, right? In the sense that no one would ever consider building most software this way today. So how do we shift that mindset from something which obviously doesn't even know that this is possible, which is still the majority of people, I would imagine, through some kind of midpoint where they're like, well, I get that it's possible, but I'm not trusting an AI machine to build my production, ERP. Through that point, there's some point where not only are they willing to do it, but they actually trust that output more than they would have trusted a human team, which is where we get to. I'm 100% certain of that.
It sort of reminds me of that issue of people perhaps not trusting AI pilots to fly their planes, even if they can be shown statistically that they might be safer. There's still always a human kind of trust element to these things. So,
absolutely.
Yeah. You knew that I was going to ask you this. How does what you do compare with, for example, what ChatGPT or DeepSeek can generate, and how do you see those growing with respect to what you're doing, and are they actually competitors in your view at all?
Well, I guess I'd kind of break it into three parts. the kind of potential competitive market. The one is the actual kind of OpenAIs, Anthropics of this world, that are kind of coming up with these models, right? And those appear to be quite dangerous to us. But now we're lucky enough to be able to chat with them kind of more directly and understand their kind of strategies. And their approach actually seems to be more generic, more of like okay, we'll create the tools, if you will, but it's not possible for us to dive into every little niche. And some of the problems that we're solving are so complicated that they would have to dedicate huge resource to solving that. And being that specific doesn't seem, from what they tell us, to be the direction that they're heading. At least not at the moment. So I'm a lot less concerned about competition from, say, an OpenAI or an Anthropic as I was, say, 18 months ago, kind of when we started. In fact, just to build on that, they tend to help us, if anything, right? Because they're constantly evolving better models that we can then consume. The other two parts are more direct competition. One are people who are building whole new models that allegedly focus specifically on building these whole code bases, right? So that's a different technique to what we're doing, because we're using existing models and kind of orchestrating them in a clever way, right? But this potential competition are actually building their own models, right? Their own kind of GPT style models. Now, none of them have actually come out with a product yet, right? So it may not even be possible, right, to do it. But if it is, then that will be an interesting juncture, because we've made the assumption that is not possible, or not possible to do effectively.
Well, that brings us back to I believe you called it the bounded determinism approach, which they're not using.
No, but in this instance, they would be building, because they were building their own model. They would end up with something like, a kind of thinking model, I think, along the lines of OpenAI's O series models, so O1 and O3. So it would be doing some kind of rationalization and kind of thinking, and it would be trained specifically on code. So there's a couple out there. There's one called Magic, one called Poolside, but they're still training their models. So it's a little bit unclear where they're going to get to. Our belief is that technique won't work perfectly, and therefore our orchestration approach is better, which takes us into the third and final category of competition, which are people doing the same type of thing as us. Replit, for example, Lovable. These are other examples of companies doing similar things, and to be honest, the results. They've done some impressive things. I think we've done some impressive things. We constantly test ourselves against these different platforms, and they tend to be a little bit quicker because as we've discussed, our platform does a bit more thinking. Ours seems to be able to deal with non-technical users better and to deal with complexity a little bit better. But these are kind of the three buckets that I see. The first one is the OpenAIs and Anthropics of the world. I'm less worried about that now. The people building their own models, still to be determined how that turns out. And then the people doing more like what we're doing. And at the moment, there are a handful of us, and we're all kind of pushing the boundaries. And I think it's fascinating, because I think the market is so large when we get to the destination that actually I'm not too worried about the fact there is competition. I think that anything that they do, anything that any of us does, kind of just lifts the water for the tide for all boats.
I'm seeing that already in, for example, image generative AI. Professionals using these tools are actually saying this tool's better if you want to create anime. This one's better for slightly different applications. So we're already seeing this in other spaces, and I expect it'll be the same in yours.
For sure. Yeah.
Yeah. I didn't ask you earlier, but I would love to hear your origin story. How did you get into this in the first place?
Yeah, the origin of origin, the tongue twister. Right. I get into sometimes. Yeah, I mean, to some extent, it's been my whole career coming, right? In the sense that throughout my career, I've always aspired to kind of automating myself in some way, right? As kind of an engineer and product person. And I've experimented with that in the past, but really wasn't until GPT-4 came out, that I looked at what it was doing and I realized something had fundamentally changed in the technology. It had moved from what just appeared to be just repeating, in effect, stuff from its training data to something that could actually perform logical operations, which is obviously a much bigger step. And I immediately realized when I saw that model that that was exactly the type of logic and capability that would be required to automate properly, creation of kind of code bases. So there's sort of a technical thread along there. And then my co-founder and I both spent several years working at Bain and Company in their innovation team. And really, this is where I kind of saw the need, right, the kind of business side of this, in the sense that I could see it was always very difficult to get digital tools and particularly custom tools signed off. Especially if it's maybe, something that everyone agrees holds value, but maybe isn't going to be like moving the needle, right, in terms of the grand scheme of a business and the direction it's going. But everyone agrees it's valuable, but getting a custom human team to build that is an enormous challenge. So having seen that firsthand, if we then combine that with this sudden technology advancement, it became pretty clear that this was something that a train that I had to get on. Right, it had left the station, and I was definitely going to be on it.
So I think there's no doubt that this is going to be a part of the future. We don't know exactly what that's going to look like. And the fact that there are you and other competitors trying different approaches is, to me, incredibly fascinating and exciting to see which approach fundamentally is going to win. We've seen this story play out, in history many times. Competing approaches to see which one fundamentally is going to take off.
I completely agree, and I actually think I feel somewhat blessed to be in a position, right at the right point in my career where I have the experience I need to understand how to do this, and the timing, if you will, the luck of timing to be, there at a point where I could try and kind of, be part of this journey. It really is an incredible time to be working in technology.
Well, so I wanted you on the show because it's just an amazing idea that you're working on. Can people try this now? Is it open publicly to beta, or actually commercially open at this stage?
Absolutely. We opened it into public beta literally just a couple of weeks ago. So you can literally go to our homepage. I'm sure maybe we can include it in links somewhere, right? But sure, yeah. If not, then it's just theorigin.ai is the homepage, and you can literally start brainstorming completely for free with our AI architect, and it will then guide you through that process. And creating the account and then ending up with the production software. And I would very much welcome people to try it out and see what they can do with it and what they can't do with it. Right? And if you find something you can't do, then please let us know.
Yes, last time we spoke, you mentioned that you were in talks with the VC with funding. Do you have any news for us? Are there any updates?
No, it's still closing the round. We're raising a seed round at the moment, which, like all fundraising, is always good fun. But yeah, we've made some progress on that front, but there's nothing signed yet.
Right. Well, Luke, it's been fantastic having you on the show. Thank you so much for your time, and obviously wish you absolutely all the best with Origin. And maybe after filming this, I'll hop onto the public beta and try it myself.
Please do.
If you would like to get in touch with Luke, you can email him at luke.ferris@theorigin.ai. So, what did you think of Origin AI? Did you try the public beta? I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe so you won't miss our next deep dive into the startup world. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.